Like, you know, as big as of a Kobe Bryant fan as I am, I loved his work ethic. I loved how he played on the court. I loved the whole idea of the Mamba mentality and just going the extra mile. I don't know how his personal life was. We all know that he made very public mistakes that he atoned for. I don't want to be Kobe. There's parts of his game that I like. There's parts of his work ethic that I like, and I try to incorporate the things that I think would work for me. And I think it's important that we always remember that everyone's human. We're all human, and we all have flaws, and we're all going to mess up. And to better yourself and to not be let down, just try to take the inspirational and aspirational things that you like. Like if you like that a couple works well together, try to figure out how they're doing it and bring that into your life. But you don't have to worship the couple.
Not even necessarily how they're doing it, because how they're doing it might not work for you. Right. Just find out how working together with your spouse,
right,
that feels good for both of y'all, how that's going to work. Because what's working for them and making it look good might not be the thing that works for you. You have to figure out your own blueprint, your own plan, your own framework.
When we were watching the Tina Turner documentary, she mentioned that she mentioned that she never felt loved. It wasn't until
and that the bad in her life outweighed
60,
the good.
60.
She doesn't feel like she lived a good life.
Yeah, she feels like she hadn't lived a good life despite all the success.
She's 81.
Now I'm talking about when she found her when she found her guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how she was older.
She was definitely older.
She was old. I'm not sure how old she was, but that was way later in life when she finally felt like she had a relationship that brought some love into her life. Because she was abandoned by her parents, didn't have a relationship with them really. She didn't really have the relationship she wanted with her kids because she was working, and she felt like her life was, and she had the relationship with Ike, but that didn't go well, and she didn't have a lot of love in her life. And I think you have to really, a lot of people wanted, they like the story of Tina Turner, they like the success, but you have to understand that just success might not be enough for you. Maybe it is for some people. You often hear that, there's something else missing. And you have to figure out how to balance that. You have to figure out what your personal balance is.
Because she basically had success at the cost of everything else.
Right.
And yes, we can look at her and say that's a living legend right now. And her music changed the game, and she inspired so many other musicians and all this stuff.
Part of that too was she was locked into bad business deals, musically,
right?
Because Ike, when they divorced, Ike took everything but her name, so she had to work. She had to work
scratch
to
pay off.
Up. She had a lot of debt with record labels.
She ended up with the debt. He ended up with the money.
Right. So he did her super dirty, and she had to do all this extra work. So she was working to pay off a lot of debt, and that's part of the reason that she could never take a break and even enjoy the initial success that she had. And so. I understand why she feels that way. When I listen to her talk and I look at her story, but I think that the biggest lesson to me is to just try to remember that you have to find balance.
The other thing with the documentary, I wanted more of her. I think that they still focused a lot on Ike, and yes, Ike was a big part of her life in terms of the music that she made initially, and then that divorce ruling and how her life, but. I wanted to find out more about that relationship with her mother. Where was her father? I want to find out more about what her kids thought about her. I want to find out more about what she was eating and what her routine was and her skincare.
Because kept talking about that.
Tina's body at 60, 50, and she's doing these shows and sweating.
She did 230 shows in 18 months. 230 shows
in 18 months, sis. What is your diet? Are you
at 50
vegan?
plus? At 50 plus, that a world tour, 230 shows, 18 months.
I want to know about that. How did you keep going? What did you do to keep your voice in good shape? Were you drinking honey and lemon and rum to keep your voice smooth? I wanted more of Tina, the details and stuff, and I really wanted to dig into that mother-daughter relationship because I don't know if she really I didn't get from it that she did therapy necessarily behind that relationship. I don't know.
I think she probably did do something.
But that mother-daughter relationship, that to me is the foundation of everything. Not even just that, like her parents abandoning her
Right.
was the foundation of everything, you know, with her relationships and the way that she felt about herself for a long time and the things that she wasn't able to make peace with. Even that interview with her mother.
Yeah, that
tell her mother didn't know her. Like,
there was an old clip and they asked her mother what was she most proud of, and she was saying that she didn't need nobody to hold the ladder. And when I was watching her say that, and like the way she described her mother, I was just thinking, it brought me back to the whole thing like with black people and the continuous cycles of trauma that we're facing.
Because she said her mom, even though she did stuff for her mom, she bought her house and all this stuff, she still felt like her mom didn't like her. Yeah,
she felt like her mom didn't like her, and she felt her mom. She kept saying that her mom didn't think that her daughter was doing that. Like she was like, "Who's helping you do this? Who?" And but that to me, right? That lack of love for her daughter comes from a lack of self-love.
Right.
When I was looking at it, like, she didn't believe that her offspring could have that level of success.
That came from her.
Right.
Could do so good and have such an impact in the
world.
And
it's easy for me to imagine that because, she was probably the daughter of, if not slaves, sharecroppers.
Right.
Like they were in the deep South and
that's the story that I wanted more of. And I don't know,
maybe they don't know it probably.
Maybe. And like maybe Tina didn't want to dig into that as much.
But how would she know it? Because her mom wasn't around.
Right.
She don't know her mom. And this is what I'm saying. Like the cycles of like so when you're a kid, you don't know why your parents are doing what they're doing.
And you tell yourself all types of stories. Right. And those are the stories that stay with you and define you until you're able to deal with them on a serious level, right? And heal from those stories that you tell yourself, because if nobody's able to correct that narrative, it runs off in your head.
Right.
So, I felt for her in that moment, especially as someone who I wasn't raised by my mom, I was raised by my grandparents. And, I know that my mom loves me and all that stuff, but even as a child, my dad wasn't around. You tell yourself, you create a narrative in your head about what is happening,
right?
Especially if nobody is counteracting that narrative and telling you an age appropriate truth,
right?
So I really felt for her, and just her. You could see that she really wanted that affection from her mother, and it made me think about her grandmother and why her mother would treat her that way, and if her mother felt loved by her mother.
Bill Burr told this great joke about that, right? Like he said, like a lot of times your parents just do a little bit better than the last generation. He's like, if your dad whooped you with a belt, his dad was probably whooping him with a chain.
Yes.
And like he's like, well, he had it better than I had it.
Yeah.
And every generation gets a little bit better. And
that's
I think
so true.
This is super true. But when you look at black people, right? If you go back 4 generations, you're talking about slaves, right? And slaves, like a lot of the stuff that we still do comes from that, right? Like slaves had to beat their kids to keep them in line so that they didn't get killed or sold or, mutilated by, the system of slavery. So the lengths that they had to go to try to make sure that their kids were safe was, and the lack of resources they had to pour into their kids, and probably this just lack of self-worth. Like I can't ever really put into my mind what that must feel like to just have no freedom, no rights, have no self-determination, and your life is just being a slave. Like the amount of like, what do you have to give a kid?
I mean, based on where we are now, I think people gave a lot. But the reality of existing in that system and seeing something opposite of what your parents, and this is even true today, right? And as we talk about kids in the hood and people live in poverty and all this stuff, like it's hard. This is why you can't kumbaya yourself out of a lot of shit when you're talking about systemic oppression,
right?
Because it's one thing for you to be sending these positive messages, but and some people may run with that and do well, but also if you are seeing your environment and seeing what's happening and they say, well, I'm hearing this, but what I'm seeing is looking very different from what I'm hearing, from what you're trying to tell me.
That you can actually turn against that.
Right.
That you like that. Stop lying to me about that crap.
So it works for some people. And it's so interesting how some people turn out, like succeeding and all that stuff. And then others
This is why Frederick Douglass is one of my favorite people. There's Harriet Tubman too, but to just have the idea that I don't care what society's telling me. I don't care what y'all told me. I know that I'm more valuable than this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to live my life like I'm this valuable. I mean, black people still have to do that. We still have to prove our value every day. You just have to believe in yourself and in your own, because people are going to try to devalue you just based on that, which is just ridiculous that we still, I mean, it makes sense in history because it hasn't been that long. Like, we just talked about it's only 4 generations since we were there. But it's frustrating that's the state of things.
Don't you wanna feel